Chapter 3. My Journey to Hell. Depression. Few prioritize men's mental health, including depression. Male depression often receives the same treatment to that of women's depression, leading to ineffective outcomes when men experience it. While efforts are made to make men feel loved and accepted during bouts of depression, these sentiments alone do not invigorate a man's drive to overcome. What men truly require is a sense of capability, power, and indispensability. Contrastingly, women typically seek communal support, love, acceptance, and nurturing during challenging times. They benefit from open dialogue and emotional support. However, men often choose to navigate their struggles independently. Men need to walk through fire, striving to emerge victorious on their own terms. This solitary journey through adversity reinforces their sense of capability, strength, and empowerment. Although exceptions exist, I aim to address the prevailing trend. Providing a man with purpose and the means to achieve it will motivate him to endure even the harshest challenges. Women's mental well-being thrives when acknowledged, whereas men's mental health flourishes when they feel indispensable. Therefore, it may seem harsh, but men prioritize being valued and needed over mere displays of affection. Consequently, men focus on problem-solving rather than embarking on emotional journeys, fostering the belief that nobody truly cares about men's mental health. Pain and trauma permeates through generations until someone is prepared to confront it. For many, the cycle of avoidance becomes a generational curse, inherited from ancestors who chose to ignore their pain. Yet, pain insists on being acknowledged, and eventually, a child is born with the profound duty to embrace it all. These individuals become the shamans, the priests and priestesses, the healers of their lineage. Society often labels them as mental health patients, attaching diagnoses like depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder. However, they possess the innate gift of empathy and deep feeling, understanding that refusing to acknowledge pain only perpetuates suffering. True health isn't measured by conformity to a sick society's norms. In every person's journey, there comes a point of reckoning where progress seems impossible. At such moments, acceptance becomes the only path forward, a testament to human resilience. As for me, I don't aspire to be a genius. Navigating the complexities of being human is challenging enough. Depression is temporary for most people. We reflect and contrast our life versus what it could have been. Feelings of hopelessness only intensify for a few, and a period of depression begins. We view ourselves as an object of self-pity, hate, and worthlessness. Depression can be caused by biological factors such as genetics or a lack of dopamine or serotonin in the brain. Still, our way of living is what impacts our emotional health. A significant cause of depression is heavily relying on others for our feelings of self-worth. We need to feel valuable because it is our nature to be narcissistic. But when we choose to believe that we are not worthy, we suffer deeply. Climbing the social ladder, what status symbols we possess, and who we associate with are all chosen by us to give us our feelings of worth. The more sources of self-worth you possess, the better. That way, when you lose one, it will not feel like your heart was taken from you. You don't put all your eggs in one basket. Depression is caused by two factors: the loss of a valued object intertwined with our feelings of self-worth. Due to social conditioning, most people rely too much on a romantic partner or parent for their feelings of self-worth. You should not seek validation and direction from others to fulfill your worth. Once you put your parent or romantic partner atop the hierarchy or throne, it is difficult to dethrone them and let go of the character projections you have given them. Many attempt to justify their enslavement to a partner or parent by saying the relationship is only out of utility. Relying on others for our pride and respect kills our self-esteem. What we valued was our identity attached to the other. Independence is a skill that must be earned. If the person or object that we value dies or abandons us, it will trigger feelings of anxiety and depression. On the other hand, some choose not to rely on others for their feelings of self-worth, but to attach themselves to grandiose life goals as their primary source of pride, self-esteem, and self-respect. Who chooses this path? Those who are unsuccessful in interpersonal relationships due to how upbringing and childhood affected their adulthood. Ostracization from a group, rejection, or neglect by parents are the main reasons someone fails at interpersonal communication and relationships. If you are someone everyone constantly rejects, then the individual will come to believe that people are not the problem but themselves, which is possibly true. The individual engraved the idea that what he is currently is insufficient for acceptance. He must, therefore, become something else to be accepted by others, which will grant him feelings of self-worth through the love and respect of others. How will they achieve this? By achieving grandiosity, becoming a famous artist or musician, earning a prestigious career. Chasing after this ambition gives a person meaning, and this meaning creates feelings of worth. However, just like the person who relies on a romantic partner or parent for their feelings of worth, the ambitions of this type of individual also place him at risk of depression. The problem is not focusing on a single goal, since concentrating on too many goals at once can often be overwhelming. But the goal can be too high and out of reach, or merely impossible for the person. While some achieve their goal of grandiosity, many do not. For those that don't, it remains nothing but a fantasy and emptiness in the heart. Just like a partner can die for someone who relies on others for their feelings of self-worth, the dreamer experiences death as the symbolic death of the individual or character they wish to become. Thus, when the ambitious man, whose slogan was either Caesar or nothing, does not become Caesar, he is in despair over it. But this signifies something else, namely, that precisely because he did not become Caesar, he now cannot bear to be himself. Consequently, he is not in despair over the fact that he did not become Caesar, but he is in despair over himself for the fact that he did not become Caesar. Søren Kierkegaard, The Sickness unto Death. For me, this was the case. After releasing my first album, I saw my talents and gifts as a curse. As my tragedy, it may not be perceived as a tragedy for you, because who wouldn't want the multiple talents of an artist? The answer was someone who understands the human condition and arbitrariness of life. All my chips were on chasing my dream, but instead, I felt empty. After reflecting and asking myself so many questions, I realized that my depression emanated from the end of the journey of my album. The songs had ended. Thereby, the meaning ended. I needed to rebuild my temple, but this time, it would be better, bigger, more complex, and more beautiful. Furthermore, this time, I had to separate my feelings of self-worth from how many people appreciated my art and the desire for fame and recognition. Beethoven did not care for fame and power. Pride, ambition, and chasing after his greatness fulfilled his musical genius. Like Nietzsche, his fame and proclamation of his genius came after his death. This began the Heaven's Vengeance Boils in My Heart album. A person dealing with depression feels stuck because their ideal dreams for relationships and life goals don't align with the limited reality they face. They can't find a solution, as what's available falls short of acceptance, and what would be acceptable seems out of reach. It's a tough situation where they feel like they have no choices. They feel trapped, struggling to make peace with the unwanted present with their unreachable goals, creating a situation where they feel helpless and without choices. Too many of us are too attached to our social masks, to the jobs we work in, and to what is considered acceptable for us to be according to society. We depend on our looks, status, numbers, and objects to tell us how much we are worth, but everything you are will fade away, and frankly, people see right through your self-deception. The object of your love is mortal. It is to one of your possessions. It has been given to you for the present, not inseparably nor forever. Epictetus, The Discourses. Sooner or later, we lose our objects and people of value, but we should not despair over this. We should see it as an opportunity to see and understand the human condition correctly. Depression sets feelings of despair and emptiness. It will give a vision inside the darkness that cannot be obtained through a shared and common brightened vision for the average person. It is through the depression you're able to take your journey to hell to explore the dark riches of your mind, your unique labyrinth. Depression is the key that opens the gates of your hell and a chance at psychological rebirth. You must be willing to save yourself, for no one will. Hell is what will burn your flaws of character away and help obtain your renewed character. It is through depression that you are reborn. The journey to hell. Since the dawn of time, civilizations and cultures have had the idea of hell, a place where you go after death, symbolized by darkness, fire, and punishment, as the result of how one conducts oneself in life. I will be focusing on the Christian symbolism of hell as I understood it as a child, and now as an adult. Hell is understood as the symbol of ultimate suffering, physically and psychologically. At a specific time and place, we have or will experience our unique and individual hell. It is an inevitable journey. The hero's journey in every tremendous epic story transforms the character since he was not born perfect, or as a hero, his heroism must be earned. The journey to hell is what he needs to confront alone to be reborn and gain new knowledge. It turns him into a man and gives him access to a new stage in life. This journey is the most important since it's what ultimately kills the hero and allows him to be reborn. It is the journey to self-knowledge. For a tree to reach the heavens, it's believed its roots must extend down to hell. The therapist's role is not to cure but to serve as a guide, friend, and interpreter as individuals navigate their way through their personal challenges. It is essential to have a guide when we all struggle in the human condition. Everyone has psychological problems, but we fail at life when we choose to be oblivious to them and not confront them. The only way through heaven is through hell since it provides essential wisdom through and by suffering. Your humility and morality of heart are molded by the agony you will go through, since it is just the beginning of your self-realization, enlightenment, and story. The intensest light of reason and revelation combined cannot shed such blazonings upon the deeper truths in a man, as will sometimes proceed from his own profoundest gloom. Utter darkness is then his light, and cat-like he distinctly sees all objects through a medium which is mere blindness to common vision. Herman Melville, Pierre, or the ambiguities. Hopelessness is another cause of depression. Hopelessness will leave your soul empty, shattered, and depressed, and make you suffer more than pain. The mind is its own place, and itself can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven. John Milton, Paradise Lost. Dante Alighieri's epic poem, The Divine Comedy, fascinated me as a teenager in high school. Dante is the central character in his poem, going through his private hell near death. The poem is a symbolic journey through hell, purgatory, and heaven, which are the three stages of life that exist simultaneously in the human experience. Midway along the journey of our life, I woke to find myself in a dark wood, for I had wandered off from the straight path. Dante Alighieri, Inferno. Your journey to self-knowledge and spiritual awakening begins when you descend to your symbolic hell. You must cross the bridge or climb the ladder between hell and heaven, but ultimately, no one can cross it for you. The Divine Comedy is Dante's symbol of what we now know as a midlife crisis. A midlife crisis is a life transition when individuals start questioning their accomplishments, pondering if those achievements still bring fulfillment and meaning. An individual might ponder what could add significance and satisfaction to the latter part of their life, addressing aspects that may be absent or undiscovered. Common triggers include job loss, health concerns, a parent's death or illness, children moving out, or even day-to-day overwhelm. The crisis period. This stage typically involves some examination of your doubts, relationships, values, and sense of self. You have to think seriously about your life when you roam away from your path. You need to stop and reflect to get to the straight path. The questions we yearn to answer during our existential crisis are correlated with our religious questions and answers. Questions about despair, alienation from the world, and anxiety about a sense of meaninglessness are intertwined with philosophy, psychology, theology, and existentialism to help you solve your riddle to life. We have evolved to avoid pain and death, to seek pleasure in the things that keep the organism alive. Genuine fear in our hearts is only found when we think deeply about death and the idea of disappearing into oblivion. What comes after it? Is there a heaven or hell? When and how will we leave our loved ones? What will become of them? I do not remember vividly how I arrived at my private hell. I remember the unbearable emptiness in my heart I felt. I can't pinpoint the exact time my suffering began, but I remember it was at its worst at the age of 20 after publishing my first music album, Symphony of My Apocalypse. Coming out of high school, I had goals aligned with what I thought was right. The path seemed straight and narrow, but my failing in university woke me up. It made me think about what my intuition was trying to tell me. You do not want to be a pharmacist. You are becoming a reflection of what your parents want you to be. You are deceiving yourself, and you're slowly dying. You are your own killer. Disillusioned with life, I took general education classes in college to see what would spark my interests. I had no close friends, family, or teachers to guide me. I could not trust anyone due to past betrayals, and I had never felt further from my family since they could not understand the human condition. They were just going through the motions of life, and people who never asked questions about the human conditions out of anxiety. Making incorrect small choices here and there took me away from my true goals, but what I didn't know was that my dreams were also my worst nightmares. I wanted to compose music, not for the sake of others but for myself. As a young adult, I believed the heavily inspired Christian symbolic lyrics were an accident, but the reality was that I was only bringing my deepest and darkest thoughts to the surface. Inspired by my cultural conditioning, I entered my journey to hell unknowingly. It felt like everything was falling apart. My existential and identity crisis, along with school and work, made the perfect storm of anxiety and depression. I had no firm ground to stand on, simply roaming around without a goal or path. The only thing I could make sense of was music. I could see it and create it too. Inspired by death, suffering, and the Book of Revelations, writing vengeful imagery, lyrics, and tragedy made sense. In my artwork and music, the deceiver of the blind, or Lucian, is blind for a reason. His pride and arrogance literally blinds him physically, mentally, and spiritually. This was me. Your ambitions will make you focus sharp, too logical, and orderly. They will blind you. It will make you push people away, even loved ones, to accomplish your mission. Betrayal can take many forms, by a person or by a system. Being betrayed many times not only leads to neurosis, but to the obsession of questioning existence. There is a reason why Dante put betrayal and Lucifer in the 9th circle of hell as the worst of all sins. It is a sin that cannot be forgiven. Betrayed by others caused me to go into the darkest depths of my mind, where rationality did not exist but only feelings and fantasies of resentment, inflicting pain and revenge. This was my hell. This was the central theme of my music. Why was it so specific from all the topics I could write about? Why did vengeance speak to me so profoundly? Because I did not want to forgive but inflict my pain upon others. These ideas can only be obtained from the depths of despair. After being betrayed, I wander into the heart of hell. Reading Dante's Inferno at age 18 appealed to me. The idea that man travels into hell, to 9 circles of hell buried inside the earth. With each climb down getting more evil and every punishment worse and worse, simply made sense to me. My curiosity craved to find out the meaning. For me, Dante's book was the climb into the depths of not just the individual but of humanity's unconscious. The deeper Dante climbs to hell, the worse the punishments become. It is a journey of vision. The first circle Dante encounters is limbo, which contains the unbaptized souls of those who, despite living righteous lives, were ignorant of Jesus as the true Savior. Great philosophers and poets lie here. These souls are not punished directly but condemned and cannot see God. The second circle is where the suffering begins. The second circle is that of the lustful, where the inhabitants must constantly deal with raging windstorms that symbolize the swaying of passions involved in adulterous relationships. In the third circle of gluttony, individuals with insatiable appetites find themselves ensnared in freezing slush, under the watchful guard of the three-headed dog, Cerberus. The fourth circle of greed, guarded by Plutus, the mythical deity of wealth, torments the souls by literally weighing them down with material possessions. The fifth circle of wrath is also known as Styx, and is a giant river filled with souls who fight each other for all eternity. Those in the sixth circle of heresy, or convictions that oppose orthodox religious doctrine, are encased in flaming tombs. The seventh circle of violence is guarded by the Minotaur and is divided into three sections: violence to others, murder, to oneself, suicide, and violence against nature and God, based upon whom an individual held violent thoughts or actions, with punishments including a river of blood, thorny trees, and burning sand. Dante put the worst sins in Circle 8. It punished those who committed fraud against individuals with whom they lacked a special bond of trust. The last circle is betrayal, where Lucifer resides for committing the ultimate sin, personal treason against God. Satan is trapped in the frozen central zone in the ninth circle of hell and has three faces, one red, one black, and one pale yellow, which is an inversion of the Holy Trinity, each having a mouth that chews on a prominent traitor, Judas who betrayed Jesus Christ, and Brutus and Cassius who betrayed their friend and leader Julius Caesar. I was not and am not sadistic. On the contrary, I knew I was going through pain, and I wanted to remedy it. So I read what my intuition guided me to read in hopes I would understand the human condition and, thereby, understand my suffering to cure it. Humans have intellect, the faculty of knowing and will, the faculty of choosing. The problem is when one does not know, because one does not have a compass to be guided to make the right choices. But even then, when one knows what is right and wrong, one does not always make the right choices. People sin primarily out of ignorance and a lack of self-control. They may think that sinning may suit them. It is a greater punishment to commit a crime knowing it is morally wrong than to commit a crime out of ignorance. God doesn't send us to hell because we have free will. We send ourselves to hell through our behavior. Heaven's vengeance boils in my heart was not my hell but my purgatory. Catharsis, or cleansing of my soul, occurred through the interaction of my art and music. It helped me burn off my imperfections. It was my rebirth. It was temporary. But to be precise, I was burned for 5 years, and it allowed me to be reborn psychologically and symbolically. In Dante's Purgatory, the greatest sin is pride, since it was the sin that condemned humanity. "Eat this, and you will be like God," said the serpent. The desire to be God led to the first sin in the Garden of Eden. My greatest sin as a youngster was pride and arrogance. My intellect was my serpent in the grass tempting me, and I ate from the poisoned tree. This is a paradoxical story because it is through sin that I reached my metaphorical heaven. In hell, the unrepented remain and attempt to justify their sins. But in purgatory, those who sin pray for forgiveness before their death and must work to be cleansed from their sins. In Dante's Inferno, he introduces the idea of contrapasso. Contrapasso stands as one of the fundamental principles in Dante's Inferno. It represents the singular law of nature governing hell, asserting that each sinner's punishment must be proportional and appropriate to their crime. Contrapasso is from Latin contra and patur, meaning suffer the opposite, is the punishment of souls by a process resembling or contrasting with the sin itself. One suffers the sin, works through and builds a virtue as a consequence of suffering. One example is great boulders pressed down on prideful people who elevated themselves. They bear their burdensome false facade until they can willingly release it. When they do, they stand tall, humble, and liberated from what they had mistakenly believed to be their authentic selves. I had to suffer humbling punishments before reaching heaven. With a bachelor's degree, being well educated, intelligent, a good physique, and 3 albums under my belt, I worked low-status jobs. I felt humiliated, but in the end, I saw that I needed to change my attitude to remember I had to stay humble or I would fall like Icarus again. One of the main lessons learned from my finished artwork was that all I was creating was an offering to the universe because I understood the human condition and existence. I needed to learn and act out humility. You need to look into hell, not just death, to gain yourself. All things coexist, but nothing is the result of itself. This is the idea of pride. You devolve once you believe you caused yourself. Purgatory is like our real world since it is a place of transition. It acts as a stairway from the bad to the good, hell is below, and heaven is above you. The goal is not perfection since an ideal cannot be reached, only approached. However, through virtue, you can reach wholeness. How does one achieve union with God? Entering heaven means reaching a heightened state of humanity beyond earthly achievements, while entering hell is to be expelled from the essence of being human. Trust me, I was fully conscious and aware I was inside a hole. I was looking for answers in a life where God had gone deaf in my time of dire need. My parents were hard-working but not wise. They could not help me. I asked them for wisdom, but you can't give something you don't have. So, for years, I explored the deepest reaches of my mind through my artwork. I feel like I started molding myself at the age of 14 when I picked up the guitar, but if I could pinpoint the official age, I would say it would be 18 because that's when I started composing and getting to know myself. I became my smith that forged the artist I became. I am what broke me down and built me. It's okay not to want to be everything you have been taught to be. You don't have to be a sacrificial, altruistic animal or a narcissistic, selfish animal that lives solely for pleasure. You can change, but only if you discipline yourself to do it. It will not be easy, for greatness is only achieved with sweat. I had thought I had to be a good Catholic, obedient to my teachers, parents, elders, and boss at work. I was conditioned, just like everyone, to believe conformity and obedience were a virtue. But I always had a nagging feeling that everything was bullshit. Betraying my life mission was killing me from within, which later led to multiple periods of depression. I was taught that cultivating my uniqueness was not a virtue, but something that was frowned upon. But when I read Nietzsche, I suddenly no longer felt alone or lonely. It honestly felt like I was being taught the wisdom of life I needed from a father who had been emotionally absent. I felt relieved to know I wasn't going insane in my ideas, talents, and my individuality. The reason why I never did drugs, though I was tempted, was because I was too afraid of what I would become. I knew that out of all my peers, I was the one who needed them most because I was suffering in silence. I saw how easily I could have been an opioid addict because I always wanted to feel the warm feeling of love and belonging that no one or nothing could provide in my adolescent years. As for alcohol, I witnessed far too many friends and family numbing their pain with it. The media portrays drinking alcohol as cool or as a virtue, but it is what ruins people's reputations. People trying to impress me would tell me, "Yay, bro, I got fucking shit-faced last night." My reply, "Wow, are you showing off how stupid you are to me? Why would you put something in your body that makes you weak? It's literally poison for you," according to scientific articles. Their response was a blank, confused stare. People thought I was a drinker because I dressed like a rocker, thinking I would be impressed by their behavior because they believed I behaved like an old-school rocker. They expected me to be predictable. Instead, they were met with ridicule and shame. Sheep will be sheep, and sheep get slaughtered. Ironically, most people damage themselves out of stupidity, not by damage that was inflicted on them by something or someone else. Symbolic death and rebirth. Can we remake our character and rise anew as a completely different person? Yes, but you must be willing to sacrifice much of what is dear to you for truth. We need to make small changes that will accumulate into significant changes over time to become who we wish to become. For some of us, we must change huge portions of our lives and our personalities. We must cultivate good habits and eliminate the bad ones. Everything you do daily matters the most. However, this only works when you have a solid foundation to build your personal growth. Diving head first into our hell unknowingly can have catastrophic consequences on our psychological health. When your life is just suffering through self-inflicted pain and making the wrong choices and sacrifices, life can feel like 0 steps forward and 2 steps back every day. For many of us, our lives need so much change that we must go through a psychological rebirth. Who does a psychological rebirth occur to? To those who need one, those who see nothing but black, not a single beam of light of hope. It does not often happen to those who are at peace, comfortable, and happy with life. What triggers a psychological rebirth? A crippling addiction, existential or identity crisis, depression, or acute suffering. Many of us go into our private hells, but only a few get out of it and are transformed. Overcoming challenges is what makes someone a hero in classic mythology and in real life. Rebirth is only granted to those willing to sacrifice what needs to be let go of. Sacrifice involves giving up a valuable part of oneself, allowing the sacrificer to avoid being consumed. It's not a complete transformation into the opposite, but rather a balancing act and union that gives rise to a new form of life energy, symbolized as sun and wind. The wind is a powerful symbol of freedom, liberating us to make fearless decisions. It symbolizes the cleansing of sins, paving the way for a spiritual journey of growth and renewal. Similarly, the sun embodies life, light, warmth, power, and divinity. To sacrifice something of value in ourselves that prevents us from changing and evolving is essential for rebirth. You must clear the way for the new by destroying the deadwood you are. Every act of creation begins with an act of destruction. Pablo Picasso. The ways of living in our past, the old frameworks of tradition and culture, may not work for us. They enchain us and keep us from evolving. We are responsible for letting go of ways of living that no longer work. Sacrifices take many forms, but not all sacrifices are of equal worth. Maybe what you would consider a sacrifice would not be a sacrifice for me, and vice versa. Perhaps you must end that romantic relationship that has grown cold, dull, and violent to be alone and know yourself. Still, you refuse to let go because you're afraid to be alone and lonely in a reality that has left you behind because you refuse to change. Or maybe you're the person with an addiction who has expensive habits to numb the pain with pleasure because you're high maintenance. Everything comes at a cost, and everyone has their price to pay with a sacrifice. The correct sacrifice will yield a rebirth. Your intuition will tell you what is most valuable to you. It's never easy to let go of what or who you love. But let's be logical here. Why wouldn't you let go of something causing your self-destruction? The person who does not change and adapts dies but is not reborn. A more accessible self often follows the death of a part of oneself. Significant transformative experiences known as ego death or psychological rebirth can be humbling and enlightening, but very stressful. Tension will arise if you decide not to burn off everything of you that must die. Your self-evolution comes with your symbolic death. You must forgo a spiritual psychological transformation to obtain the best fruits of your character. Experiencing betrayal from someone we love, like a spouse, can force us to undergo an ego death, because we question our beliefs since the framework we trusted proved it didn't work. Being betrayed by someone you trust, who is secretly malicious, will make you question your naivety. Ego death is triggered by identity and existential crises. It is not bad. On the contrary, it will force you to let go of the illusion and false beliefs and will make you more aligned with reality and better understand what it is. Ego deaths help develop a person's personality. Cognitive dissonance triggers denial. Carl Jung believed that psychological growth is obtained by understanding and accepting painful, inconvenient truths about reality and ourselves. How? By integrating the newfound wisdom we went through during our ego death, our new emerging personality will be better adapted to the harshness of reality. The complete expression of the personality is achieved through the phoenix-like transformation. You must burn to ashes to rise anew. To penetrate the darkness, you accept reality for what it is and learn inside it without it consuming you. When you let go of what you are, you become what you could be. And from such abysses of suffering, one returns newborn, having shed one's skin, with a more delicate taste for joy, with a tenderer tongue for all good things, with merrier senses, more childlike and yet 100 times subtler than one has ever been before. Friedrich Nietzsche. The sacrifice leads to curing what ails us, but for many, it can initially have the opposite effect, causing disorder in our lives. Giving up old values, beliefs, and ways of behavior can make us realize that there's nothing to fill our void. Descent into chaos can lead to a psychological breakdown instead of a rebirth. The difference between a psychological breakdown and rebirth is the result. A breakdown concludes in madness, disorganization, and more significant destruction of our lives. In contrast, rebirth leads to reorganizing our lives and mental stability, newfound courage, and a new positive character. We need to see ourselves as characters or heroes in a myth. It is our narrative. We must learn to control and choose paths that lead to a better version of ourselves. We must explore our chaos to be a twice-born. Habits like exercising, self-reflection, introspection, writing one's thoughts, and expressing oneself artistically all aid in making order out of our internal chaos. A voluntary descent is better than an involuntary descent. It's not a matter of if, but when life will swallow you whole. An involuntary sacrifice, and being cast into the depth of your metaphorical hell, has a higher probability of forcing you to go through a psychological breakdown than a rebirth. You must be prepared when it does so by arming yourself with the correct tools of philosophy that teach how to cope under high levels of stress. Take the leap into sacrifice because not making the sacrifice is a greater risk than making it. You cannot let the past make you stagnate. Descending is dangerous. You could lose your mind and not everyone needs to take that risk. However, it's inevitable that someone will. Those who choose the path of descent should do so knowingly, as it's a challenging sacrifice. Yet, every descent is followed by an ascent. What vanishes both within and externally is exchanged for beauty and truth.